Hi again then guys, and welcome to the second, or you could argue third, technically speaking, review of K-Cars in Gran Turismo Sport. And the reason why I say technically the third is because of course we looked at the Honda Beat already, but also we already had in the game the kind of weird take on a K-Car that is the Daihatsu Vision GT car, which ironically enough has the underpinnings of this vehicle, albeit in an updated form. And my thoughts are out there as far as that car's concerned. We reviewed it. I'm not a huge fan of it. It's ridiculously overpriced for what it is, but of course that's due to the standardization of pricing for Vision GT cars, so it's not really Daihatsu's fault or even the car's fault. It's just not that great from a Vision GT point of view. It's a perfectly acceptable modified K car, but it shouldn't be priced for as much as like an Enzo. That's just ridiculous. And somewhat ironically, very ironically you could say, this car is the exact opposite end of the spectrum to the Vision GT, because this is ultra affordable, super beginner friendly, and very realistic in its approach, because of course it is a real car. Now for me, I'm not a huge fan of the Copen. I never have been in any of its forms really. I've said that before on the channel, and the reason why, because some people were surprised to hear me say that, given that I am a huge Daihatsu fan and a K-car fan in general, but the reason why is because to me, as I already mentioned in my review of the Honda Beat, I'm not so much of a fan of the speciality ones. I prefer the hatchbacks, be it performance or utility, but this car even more so than something like a Cappuccino or a Honda Beat, which I do like to some degree, especially the Cappuccino. This one, to me, it just feels like too much of a fashion statement rather than an actual performance car. And funnily enough, in that sense, it almost represents a modern day equivalent, for Japan at least, to kind of like what the Triumph Spitfire was here in the UK. It was this affordable small sports car which wasn't particularly quick. It was just an affordable entry into the sports car market for those who wanted to. That's essentially what this car does as well. It just doesn't really have the, well, exotic is probably too strong a term, but for want of a better word, exotic feel of something like a Cappuccino or a Beat. Because the funny thing about those, and especially I would say the AutoZam AZ1, which looks almost like a mini supercar, they feel special and they look special. When you see one on the road, it's a big deal, no matter where you live. Whereas this one, well, it just isn't. It's always struck me as being a bit more of a fashion accessory, like a handbag or like a hairdresser's car, in effect like a Beetle convertible or a new Mini convertible. Not that that's bad, it's just not my place in the market. It doesn't appeal to me. Now if there were a super hot version, like an RSI or an RS or a GTI with a hood scoop, tastefully done of course, not a ricer, but that could appeal to me if it was something akin to what they did with the Core, with the Avanzato version, with all-wheel drive, the hood scoop, the turbo. That could really work for this one. In the case of this car, getting more performance out of it could have very easily been done. It just happens to be not particularly quick in the real world either. What about in the game though? Because of course, this is the only one of the new K cars to be front-wheel drive. The other two are both mid-engine, rear-wheel drive. And it also nestles between the two in terms of its age. It's not as old as the Beat, it's not as new as the S660, and that kind of puts it in a bit of an awkward predicament. It's not old enough to be a full-on classic, but it's not new enough to be advanced technologically anymore. So that again is kind of working against it. But what the Copen does have, I will say, regardless of if I like it or not, I will admit this, it's got charm. It is a charming little sports car, and for that, I think it is pretty good. Now, in terms of spec, it's very interesting how it compares to the other two, because just like most K cars, it falls under the same restrictions: 63 horsepower or less, under 660cc. This was actually 659, and it's less powerful than the Honda Beat. 1 horsepower less, 62, which is a pretty huge difference for a K car. But, and this is the interesting thing, and perhaps the most impressive thing about the car, the torque. It's got almost double the torque of the Honda Beat. In fact, it has a lot more torque than it does power. 81 pound-feet of torque is not bad at all for such a tiny little, as I would say, jelly bean of a car. Now the weight on this one is slightly a disadvantage to its name, because it is heavy, and that of course is partially due to the fact that it is newer, and modern cars, due to safety updates, various changes in mechanical design, how they're made, how they're built, how they're produced, it tends to make them heavier more often than not, and that does occur here as well. It weighs 830 kilos, which it depends on perspective. If you compare that to a Honda Beat or a Suzuki Cappuccino, it doesn't sound very good. If, however, I remind you that that's the same as a Mazda 787B, that doesn't sound so bad. So of course, it's all about perspective and what you compare it to. And incidentally, because of the fact that the weight is quite high for a K car, the horsepower per tonne, it suffers just a little bit. It's got 75 horsepower per tonne, which again, it's cute, it's sprightly, it's not exactly a fast car, it's not even a quick one. It's what I said, sprightly. It feels quick, but technically it's not particularly quick. And as I mentioned in yesterday's review of the Honda Beat, even though this one isn't quite the cheapest, which I would argue actually should be the cheapest of the three, given the legendary status of the Honda Beat within the category, this one's 15 grand. So it's not that much more, it's only 1200 credits difference to this, or between this and the Honda Beat, so that's not too bad. As far as handling and performance goes, it's exactly what you'd expect. It's a super small, relatively lightweight front-wheel drive sports car, so all that entails is what you'd expect. You can throw it through corners like a small hatchback, but at the same time you've got the lower centre of gravity with the lower cut roofline, two-seat layout, and everything just feels a little bit more tight and trimmed and toned compared to a small hatchback like a Daihatsu Move or a Suzuki Wagon. But at the same time, it doesn't have the practicality of those cars, so it's very much so a speciality K car by definition, just like the Beats, the Cappuccinos, the AZ1s, and various others too. So from one point of view, I totally understand why people like this car so much. It does have a lot of charm, and it is very uniquely designed, I will say that, and that's a great point to its name. To actually genuinely stand out is a rare thing these days. But the disadvantages are it's not particularly quick, even by K-car standards, and from a racing point of view, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this one. Both the other Hondas can easily beat it, so it's more the kind of car that I'd say get it if you specifically like it. For instance, if you're a Daihatsu fan like I am, then show them some love, but beyond that, it's not the most useful thing around, so buy it more for the fun factor and then maybe race it later. But as long as you buy it for fun first and foremost, you can't really be disappointed if it doesn't win anything. But that's it for this pick. Of course, I'll see you guys next time. In fact, I'll see you tomorrow for a review of the Ferrari 250 GTO. Considerably different end of the food chain to this car. But that's it for this pick, and I'll see you then. And for now, as always, thanks for watching.